Welcome to the Chronicles of Josephus audiobook. In this episode, we continue through Book 3 of the Antiquities of the Jews by Flavius Josephus, covering chapters 10 through 12. In these chapters, Josephus carefully records the divine order of Israel's sacred life, the appointed festivals, the laws of purification, and the moral statutes given through Moses. Now let us continue with Book 3, beginning with chapter 10. Book 3, chapter 10, concerning the festivals, and how each day of such festival is to be observed. 1. The law requires that out of the public expenses a lamb of the first year be killed every day, at the beginning and at the ending of the day. But on the seventh day, which is called the Sabbath, they kill two and sacrifice them in the same manner. At the new moon, they both perform the daily sacrifices and slay 2 bulls with 7 lambs of the first year, and a kid of the goats also for the expiation of sins, that is, if they have sinned through ignorance. 2. But on the 7th month, which the Macedonians call Hyperboreteus, they make an addition to those already mentioned, and sacrifice a bull, a ram, and 7 lambs, and a kid of the goats for sins. 3. On the 10th day of the same lunar month, they fast till the evening, and this day they sacrifice a bull and 2 rams and 7 lambs, and a kid of the goats for sins. And besides these, they bring 2 kids of the goats, the one of which is sent alive out of the limits of the camp into the wilderness for the scapegoat, and to be an expiation for the sins of the whole multitude. But the other is brought into a place of great cleanness within the limits of the camp, and is there burnt with its skin, without any sort of cleansing. With this goat was burnt a bull, not brought by the people, but by the high priest at his own charges, which, when it was slain, he brought of the blood into the holy place, together with the blood of the kid of the goats, and sprinkled the ceiling with his finger 7 times, as also its pavement, and again as often toward the most holy place, and about the golden altar. He also at last brings it into the open court, and sprinkles it about the great altar. Besides this, they set the extremities, and the kidneys, and the fat, with the lobe of the liver, upon the altar. The high priest likewise presents a ram to God, as a burnt offering. 4. Upon the 15th day of the same month, when the season of the year is changing for winter, the law enjoins us to pitch tabernacles in every one of our houses, so that we preserve ourselves from the cold of that time of the year. As also that when we should arrive at our own country, and come to that city which we should have then for our metropolis, because of the temple therein to be built, and keep a festival for 8 days, and offer burnt offerings, and sacrifice thank offerings, that we should then carry in our hands a branch of myrtle and willow, and a bough of the palm tree, with the addition of the pome citron. That the burnt offering on the first of those days was to be a sacrifice of 13 bulls, and 14 lambs, and 15 rams, with the addition of a kid of the goats as an expiation for sins. And on the following days the same number of lambs and of rams, with the kids of the goats, but abating one of the bulls every day till they amounted to 7 only. On the 8th day all work was laid aside, and then, as we said before, they sacrificed to God a bullock, a ram, and 7 lambs, with a kid of the goats, for an expiation of sins. And this is the accustomed solemnity of the Hebrews when they pitch their tabernacles. 5. In the month of Xanthicus, which is by us called Nisan, and is the beginning of our year, on the 14th day of the lunar month, when the sun is in Aries, for in this month it was that we were delivered from bondage under the Egyptians, the law ordained that we should every year slay that sacrifice, which I before told you we slew when we came out of Egypt, and which was called the Passover. And so we do celebrate this Passover in companies, leaving nothing of what we sacrifice till the day following. The Feast of Unleavened Bread succeeds that of the Passover, and falls on the 15th day of the month, and continues 7 days, wherein they feed on unleavened bread, on every one of which days 2 bulls are killed, and 1 ram, and 7 lambs. Now these lambs are entirely burnt, besides the kid of the goats which is added to all the rest, for sins, for it is intended as a feast for the priest on every one of those days. But on the 2nd day of unleavened bread, which is the 16th day of the month, they first partake of the fruits of the earth, for before that day they do not touch them. And while they suppose it proper to honor God, from whom they obtain this plentiful provision. In the first place, they offer the first fruits of their barley, and that in the manner following. They take a handful of the ears and dry them, then beat them small, and purge the barley from the bran. They then bring 1/10 deal to the altar, to God, and casting one handful of it upon the fire, they leave the rest for the use of the priest. And after this, it is that they may publicly or privately reap their harvest. They also, at this participation of the first fruits of the earth, sacrifice a lamb as a burnt offering to God. 6. When a week of weeks has passed over after this sacrifice, which weeks contain 40 and 9 days, on the 50th day, which is Pentecost, but is called by the Hebrews Asartha, which signifies Pentecost, they bring to God a loaf made of wheat flour of 2/10 deals with leaven, and for sacrifices they bring 2 lambs. And when they have only presented them to God, they are made ready for supper for the priests. Nor is it permitted to leave anything of them till the day following. They also slay 3 bullocks for a burnt offering, and 2 rams, and 14 lambs, with 2 kids of the goats for sins. Nor is there any one of the festivals, but in it they offer burnt offerings. They also allow themselves to rest on every one of them. Accordingly, the law prescribes in them all what kinds they are to sacrifice, and how they are to rest entirely, and must slay sacrifices in order to feast upon them. 7. However, out of the common charges, baked bread was set on the table of shew bread, without leaven, of 24/10 deals of flour, for so much is spent upon this bread. 2 heaps of these were baked. They were baked the day before the Sabbath, but were brought into the holy place on the morning of the Sabbath, and set upon the holy table, 6 on a heap, one loaf still standing over against another, where 2 golden cups full of frankincense were also set upon them. And there they remained till another Sabbath, and then other loaves were brought in their stead, while the loaves were given to the priests for their food, and the frankincense was burnt in that sacred fire, wherein all their offerings were burnt also. And so other frankincense was set upon the loaves instead of what was there before. The high priest also, of his own charges, offered a sacrifice, and that twice every day. It was made of flour mingled with oil, and gently baked by the fire. The quantity was 1/10 deal of flour. He brought the half of it to the fire in the morning, and the other half at night. The account of these sacrifices I shall give more accurately hereafter, but I think I have premised what for the present may be sufficient concerning them. This concludes Book 3, Chapter 10, Chapter 11, of the Purifications. 1. Moses took out the tribe of Levi from communicating with the rest of the people, and set them apart to be a holy tribe, and purified them by water taken from perpetual springs, and with such sacrifices as were usually offered to God on the like occasions. He delivered to them also the tabernacle, and the sacred vessels, and the other curtains, which were made for covering the tabernacle, that they might minister under the conduct of the priests who had been already consecrated to God. 2. He also determined concerning animals, which of them might be used for food, and which they were obliged to abstain from, which matters, when this work shall give me occasion, shall be further explained. And the causes shall be added by which he was moved to allot some of them to be our food, and enjoined us to abstain from others. However, he entirely forbade us the use of blood for food, and esteemed it to contain the soul and spirit. He also forbade us to eat the flesh of an animal that died of itself, as also the caul, and the fat of goats, and sheep, and bulls. 3. He also ordered that those whose bodies were afflicted with leprosy, and that had a gonorrhea, should not come into the city. Nay, he removed the women, when they had their natural purgations, till the 7th day, after which he looked on them as pure, and permitted them to come in again. The law permits those also who have taken care of funerals to come in after the same manner, when this number of days is over. But if any continued longer than that number of days in a state of pollution, the law appointed the offering 2 lambs for a sacrifice, the one of which they are to purge by fire, and for the other the priests take it for themselves. In the same manner do those sacrifice who have had the gonorrhea. But he that sheds his seed in his sleep, if he go down into cold water, has the same privilege with those that have lawfully accompanied with their wives. And for the lepers, He suffered them not to come into the city at all, nor to live with any others, as if they were in effect dead persons. But if anyone had obtained by prayer to God the recovery from that distemper, and had gained a healthful complexion again, such a one returned thanks to God with several sorts of sacrifices, concerning which we will speak hereafter. 4. Whence one cannot but smile at those who say that Moses was himself afflicted with the leprosy when he fled out of Egypt, and that he became the conductor of those who on that account left that country, and led them into the land of Canaan. For had this been true, Moses would not have made these laws to his own dishonor, which indeed it was more likely he would have opposed if others had endeavored to introduce them, and this the rather, because there are lepers in many nations, who yet are in honor, and not only free from reproach and avoidance, but who have been great captains of armies, and been entrusted with high offices in the commonwealth, and have had the privilege of entering into holy places and temples, so that nothing hindered. But if either Moses himself, or the multitude that was with him, had been liable to such a misfortune in the color of his skin, he might have made laws about them for their credit and advantage, and have laid no manner of difficulty upon them. Accordingly, it is a plain case that it is out of violent prejudice only that they report these things about us. But Moses was pure from any such distemper, and lived with countrymen who were pure of it also, and thence made the laws which concerned others that had the distemper. He did this for the honor of God. But as to these matters, let everyone consider them after what manner he pleases. 5. As to the women, when they have borne a child, Moses forbade them to come into the temple, or touch the sacrifices, before 40 days were over, supposing it to be a boy. But if she hath borne a girl, the law is that she cannot be admitted before twice that number of days be over. And when after the before-mentioned time appointed for them, they perform their sacrifices, the priests distribute them before God. 6. But if anyone suspect that his wife has been guilty of adultery, he was to bring a 10th deal of barley flour. They then cast 1 handful to God, and gave the rest of it to the priests for food. One of the priests set the woman at the gates that are turned towards the temple, and took the veil from her head, and wrote the name of God on parchment, and enjoined her to swear that she had not at all injured her husband, and to wish that, if she had violated her chastity, her right thigh might be put out of joint, that her belly might swell, and that she might die thus, but that if her husband, by the violence of his affection, and of the jealousy which arose from it, had been rashly moved to this suspicion, that she might bear a male child in the 10th month. Now when these oaths were over, the priest wiped the name of God out of the parchment, and wrung the water into a vial. He also took some dust out of the temple, if any happened to be there, and put a little of it into the vial, and gave it her to drink. Whereupon the woman, if she were unjustly accused, conceived with child, and brought it to perfection in her womb. But if she had broken her faith of wedlock to her husband, and had sworn falsely before God, she died in a reproachful manner. Her thigh fell off from her, and her belly swelled with a dropsy. And these are the ceremonies about sacrifices, and about the purifications thereto belonging, which Moses provided for his countrymen. He also prescribed the following laws to them. You have been listening to Flavius Josephus, The Antiquities of the Jews, Book 3. Chapter 11 of the Purifications, read word for word from the ancient historical record. Continue with Book 3, Chapter 12, as Josephus proceeds to lay out the laws and ordinances governing the nation of Israel. Chapter 12, word for word audiobook reading. Several laws. 1. As for adultery, Moses forbade it entirely, as esteeming it a happy thing that men should be wise in the affairs of wedlock, and that it was profitable both to cities and families that children should be known to be genuine. He also abhorred men's lying with their mothers as one of the greatest crimes, and the like for lying with the father's wife, and with aunts and sisters and sons' wives, as all instances of abominable wickedness. He also forbade a man to lie with his wife when she was defiled by her natural purgation, and not to come near brute beasts, nor to approve of the lying with a male, which was to hunt after unlawful pleasures on account of beauty. To those who were guilty of such insolent behavior he ordained death for their punishment. 2. As for the priests, he prescribed to them a double degree of purity, for he restrained them in the instances above, and moreover forbade them to marry harlots. He also forbade them to marry a slave or a captive, and such as got their living by cheating trades and by keeping inns, as also a woman parted from her husband on any account whatsoever. Nay, he did not think it proper for the high priest to marry even the widow of one that was dead, though he allowed that to the priests, but he permitted him only to marry a virgin and to retain her. Whence it is that the high priest is not to come near to one that is dead, although the rest are not prohibited from coming near to their brethren, or parents, or children, when they are dead, but they are to be unblemished in all respects. He ordered that the priest who had any blemish should have his portion indeed among the priests, but he forbade him to ascend the altar, or to enter into the holy house. He also enjoined them not only to observe purity in their sacred ministrations, but in their daily conversation, that it might be unblameable also. And on this account it is that those who wear the sacerdotal garments are without spot and eminent for their purity and sobriety, nor are they permitted to drink wine so long as they wear those garments. Moreover, they offer sacrifices that are entire and have no defect whatsoever. 3. And truly Moses gave them all these precepts, being such as were observed during his own lifetime. But though he lived now in the wilderness, yet did he make provision how they might observe the same laws when they should have taken the land of Canaan. He gave them rest to the land from plowing and planting every 7th year, as he had prescribed to them to rest from working every 7th day, and ordered that then what grew of its own accord out of the earth should in common belong to all that pleased to use it, making no distinction in that respect between their own countrymen and foreigners. And he ordained that they should do the same after 7 times 7 years, which in all are 50 years. And that 50th year is called by the Hebrews the Jubilee, wherein debtors are freed from their debts, and slaves are set at liberty, which slaves became such, though they were of the same stock, by transgressing some of those laws, the punishment of which was not capital, but they were punished by this method of slavery. This year also restores the land to its former possessors in the manner following. When the Jubilee is come, which name denotes liberty, he that sold the land and he that bought it meet together and make an estimate, on one hand of the fruits gathered, and on the other hand of the expenses laid out upon it. If the fruits gathered come to more than the expenses laid out, he that sold it takes the land again. But if the expenses prove more than the fruits, the present possessor receives of the former owner the difference that was wanting, and leaves the land to him. And if the fruits received and the expenses laid out prove equal to one another, the present possessor relinquishes it to the former owners. Moses would have the same law obtain as to those houses also which were sold in villages, but he made a different law for such as were sold in a city. For if he that sold it tendered the purchaser his money again within a year, he was forced to restore it. But in case a whole year had intervened, the purchaser was to enjoy what he had bought. This was the constitution of the laws which Moses learned of God when the camp lay under Mount Sinai, and this he delivered in writing to the Hebrews. 4. Now, when this settlement of laws seemed to be well over, Moses thought fit at length to take a review of the host, as thinking it proper to settle the affairs of war. So he charged the heads of the tribes, excepting the tribe of Levi, to take an exact account of the number of those that were able to go to war, for as to the Levites, they were holy and free from all such burdens. Now when the people had been numbered, there were found 600,000 that were able to go to war from 20 to 50 years of age, besides 3,650. Instead of Levi, Moses took Manasseh the son of Joseph among the heads of tribes, and Ephraim instead of Joseph. It was indeed the desire of Jacob himself to Joseph that he would give him his sons to be his own by adoption, as I have before related. 5. When they set up the tabernacle, they received it into the midst of their camp, 3 of the tribes pitching their tents on each side of it, and roads were cut through the midst of these tents. It was like a well-appointed market, and everything was there ready for sale in due order, and all sorts of artificers were in the shops. and it resembled nothing so much as a city that sometimes was movable and sometimes fixed. The priests had the first places about the tabernacle, then the Levites, who, because their whole multitude was reckoned from 30 days old, were 23,880 males. And during the time that the cloud stood over the tabernacle, they thought proper to stay in the same place, as supposing that God there inhabited among them. But when that removed, they journeyed also. 6. Moreover, Moses was the inventor of the form of their trumpet, which was made of silver. Its description is this: in length, it was little less than a cubit. It was composed of a narrow tube, somewhat thicker than a flute, but with so much breadth as was sufficient for admission of the breath of a man's mouth. It ended in the form of a bell, like common trumpets. Its sound was called in the Hebrew tongue asosra. 2 of these being made, one of them was sounded when they required the multitude to come together to congregations. When the first of them gave a signal, the heads of the tribes were to assemble and consult about the affairs to them properly belonging. But when they gave the signal by both of them, they called the multitude together. Whenever the tabernacle was removed, it was done in this solemn order. At the first alarm of the trumpet, those whose tents were on the east quarter prepared to remove. When the second signal was given, those that were on the south quarter did the like. In the next place, the tabernacle was taken to pieces, and was carried in the midst of 6 tribes that went before, and of 6 that followed, all the Levites assisting about the tabernacle. When the third signal was given, that part which had their tents towards the west put themselves in motion, and at the fourth signal those on the north did so likewise. They also made use of these trumpets in their sacred ministrations, when they were bringing their sacrifices to the altar, as well on the Sabbaths as on the rest of the festival days. And now it was that Moses offered that sacrifice which was called the Passover in the wilderness, as the first he had offered after the departure out of Egypt. Thus concludes Book the 3rd, Chapter 12 of the Antiquities of the Jews by Flavius Josephus. Read word for historical preservation and understanding. If you are following this series, continue with the next chapter as we move deeper into the laws, journeys, and ordering of Israel in the wilderness.